Hi, I'm Esin, and I review stuff, and it is time for another episode of Metal Monday, where I talk about albums that I recommend you listen to so you can start your week off right. This week, I'll be covering the third release of a Cincinnati, Ohio black metal band that is a perfect example of what can happen when you add dollops of theatricality, cosmic, and gothic horror to your aggression. The said album is Valdrin's Effigy of Nightmares. Valdrin has been active in the scene since 2014, and interesting enough, the band has nothing but full-length releases since their inception. Effigy of Nightmares is their third release and the latest in a series of albums that explore the band's own self-created mythology, continuation of sorts to the story that the band has started in their 2016 opus, Two Carry On Talismans. In fact, regarding the album's narrative framework, the band states, Effigy of Nightmares, like our previous album, Two Carry On Talismans, centers around the antagonist of our mythos, Nex Animus. The story chronicles the tour of a nameless narrator through the halls of Hospitum Mortis, the nightmare hospital below the Orcus underworld itself, where Nex tortures and lobotomizes the dissident gods of his domain. In other words, fun. Valdrin's approach to black metal incorporates lots of symphonic elements into the aggressive black metal core of things. You do get your highly aggressive and dissonant riffs and furious blast beats and extremely fast drumming with harrowing, agonized screams, but on top of all that, you get lots of atmospheric synths, some folk instrumentation, and really glossy, really slick atmospheric flourishes. Although Valdrin is eager to incorporate symphonic elements to their music, they do not explore these to the degree that they would overwhelm the metal elements. In fact, the Effigy of Nightmares is a very delicate balancing act between the two sides of the music that it contains. The main dynamic that is prevalent throughout this album is the interplay between these two sides. Although the band quite frequently incorporates both elements into the passages that they create, more often than not, it features a transition from one to the other and back again. Best example of this type of interplay that will be featured quite heavily throughout the album immediately comes to the fore in the first actual musical track of the album, the second track overall, Exsanguination Tunnels. Basically a push-pull type track that starts out more or less with somewhat symphonically backed black metal before becoming pure strain of black metal, then becoming more symphonic and then going back again. This type of constant back and forth also allows the track to always be dynamic, never indulge in repetition too much or repetition to the degree that some black metal bands seem to love incorporating into their songwriting. That is not to say, however, that Valdrin's music branches out into progressive territories with constantly shifting arrangements. Quite the contrary, every single arrangement spans ample enough time in the riffs and melodies that they throw at you for you to actually process them properly. In point of fact, if there is one thing to be said about the songwriting in this album, it would be that it is extremely tight. From what I have said, Effigy of Nightmares easily could have shaped up to be an hour-plus album, but instead it is just 30 minutes long. It is an in-and-out, hit and run. Another thing about the symphonic elements that Valdrin uses in their songcraft is that these elements aren't used to soften the blow of their overall music. In fact, on tracks like Red Candles of Burning Hatred or Basilisk of Light, the band indulges far more in dissonant, disturbing, and extremely angry type black metal riffing reminiscent of 1349 or Watain. In fact, Red Burning Candles of Hatred is home to a couple things that this album does extremely well. The first and foremost being the drumming. Brian Mormere, whose last name I hope I pronounced correctly, moves through this track much in the manner of an assassin. He's extremely precise, knowing when to drum up the tension, so to speak, knowing when to be fast and furious and knowing when to be subtle. As a result of this, the harmony that he is in with the rest of the music creates a wonderful sense of both pacing and immediacy. This track also stands out in the track list because of the way that the band flexes their technical muscles during the bridge section. On the whole, Effigy of Nightmares is a somewhat progressive leaning album in terms of songwriting, but the band never indulges in technicality in the way that they do during this bridge section, with lots of interesting drumming, off-kilter riffs that are rich in pinch harmonics. This is a very, very nice break to the otherwise atmosphere-heavy proceedings. Speaking of which, this album is supposed to be a horror story, a cosmic scale gothic horror story, no less, in which we are taking a trek through a hospital in which gods are being tortured and lobotomized. And in order to support this type of narrative, the music would have to be extremely atmospheric, which is one point that Valdrin excels at. Valdrin's approach to black metal, using the metal elements as more of a driving force and the synthesizer and other backing elements, the sort of symphonic operatic flourishes that they have added as sort of a surrounding aura to that, creates a wonderfully violent, vicious, dank, and cavernous atmosphere. Like, seriously, the album does quite easily manage to conjure images of blood-soaked, grimy red brick walls enclosing you as you wander endless corridors with endless rooms and a torture method that you have not envisioned before and are horrified by behind every single door that you open. Putting aside the larger narrative for a second, I think the primary strength and atmosphere that is present in Effigy of Nightmares owes much to the fact that the band do not busy themselves trying to invoke feelings of fear. Rather, the entirety of this album is based on an aestheticization of fear and the macabre. So basically, the band isn't out to scare you. This isn't an album that you should feel uneasy about listening to in the dark. Rather, the entirety of this album is based on painting a macabrely beautiful picture of a twisted, otherworldly hospital in which you are enclosed within grimy, blood-soaked red brick walls, wandering corridors aimlessly and finding a different, mutilated, tortured god behind every single door that you open in hopes of finding a way out. Of course, aiding all of this greatly is Valdrin's undeniable skill in songwriting, leading the listener through these snaking pathways full of winding passages, seamless transitions, both abrupt and gradual, into extremely different but still familiar and still well integrated parts is an undeniable strength of Effigy of Nightmares. Despite having a very short and therefore almost breathlessly urgent playlist, the band also takes their time in the final track in delivering what every final track should be on any given album, an absolute showstopper. Down the Obolette of Maelstrom, while a summation of everything that has gone on until that point, also manages to bring the story to a close, pulls out all the stops, takes no prisoners, and brings the tale to a terrifying, screaming conclusion. It is the type of closer that leaves you wanting more, leaves you eager for the next Valdrin release, which every good closer should do. Production-wise, Effigy of Nightmares features a mix and master that is well suited to this type of material. The master especially features a really slick sheen over everything, as if it has been polished to perfection. However, the fact that it has to incorporate so many soft elements with so many of the harder ones means that the softer ones are a little bit more emphasized and the harder elements, like the guitars, have been filed down somewhat. But this doesn't do anything to take away from the impact of the sound. In fact, the somewhat softer, somewhat less raw guitars become assets when they have to be brought forward, much in the way of Red Burning Candles of Hatred or Basilisk of Light. One thing that the production also manages to accomplish is that it aids in the creation of the aforementioned atmospheres greatly, as such a dynamic and breathing mix allows for the listener to ease easily settle into the proceedings rather than try to find themselves a place within the brick-walled hellscape of a sound. As an added bonus, Gates of Hospice, the ambient intro of this album, is among the very, very few that I do not despise with a burning passion, mainly because this time the intro serves a narrative purpose. It is there to ease you into the world of Hospita Mortis, and as such, it does a great job. Yeah, I bet you never thought you'd see the day when I would praise an ambient intro, did you? Well, here we are. Overall, if you are a black metal fan, if you like some synthesizer backing or operatic elements mixing in with your metal, if you are into highly atmospheric albums, if you like horror stories, if you like dank and dark and macabre atmospheres and moods in your music, Effigy of Nightmares is definitely for you. Furthermore, if you are just getting into black metal, this album can serve as somewhat of a gateway for you, mainly because Valdrin's take on black metal is far more accessible than some of the purer examples of this genre. For my money, I think Effigy of Nightmares is another contender for my best of list of 2020, which, let's face it, at the end of the year is probably just going to feature the albums that I have reviewed on my Metal Monday segment. Be that as it may, all I have to say at the end of this is a wonderful album. There is a Bandcamp link in the description. Hope you check it out. And if you have already listened to it, why don't you let me know what you thought about it, if you liked it, hated it, or anything else. If you like my content, please like, comment, and subscribe, as it always helps. But for now, until next time, hope you have a great week. It's Eason. Peace out.